By the early 1900s, before there was a place known as Radville, there was a settlement that was already developing a few miles north. It was known as Wallendale, a small service center to that part of the district, little more than a post office and a handful of buildings to the open prairie. But Wallendale wasn't Radville. When the railway came through, the center of activity began to shift south towards the line. Buildings were hauled in from up to 4 miles from the north, including that post office, and a new town site started to take shape along the tracks. What had once been scattered across the land began to gather here, and with that, a new name was to be chosen. At first, the name Conrad was proposed, recognizing Conrad Paquin, whose farm once occupied this site. However, that name had already been used, so it was changed. Rad was taken from Conrad and combined with the French word ville, meaning town, and so the name Radville appeared. Now, to understand Radville, you have to understand the desperation that preceded it. By 1904, the last Best West was in full swing. Pioneers were pouring into Saskatchewan from France, Quebec, Britain, and the United States. They would arrive at the railway platform in Weyburn, the end of the world at the time, get off the train, and simply stare into the distance. The station's platform was a chaotic mess, piles of furniture, suitcases, crates of chickens, and families who didn't speak the same language, but they shared that same look in their eyes. From Weyburn, they pushed south and west. Those with money had horses, the rest had oxen, and the truly desperate walked. They were heading into a wilderness that offered no guarantees of survival. There is a story that perfectly captures the confusion of those early days. There was a young immigrant who did not fully understand the rules of the British Empire. He soon found a piece of land that he liked. He noticed the iron survey peg in the corner and figured that was his receipt. He pulled it out of the ground, built a small cairn of stones, and left a note saying, "Me homestead." He carried that heavy iron peg all the way back to the land office in Weyburn, slammed it on the desk with $10, and waited for his deed. Well, the agent didn't give him a deed. He gave him a $30 fine for tampering with a survey marker, because out here the law was unforgiving as a prairie winter. By 1910, almost every acre of land between Radville and the U.S. border had been filed for. However, filing and staying were two different things. To keep the title, you had to build a home and break a portion of the land, turning raw prairie into something productive. Not everyone was successful. Some did fail. So now we have a glimpse of how this place began and how it received its name. When the railway reached this stretch of the prairie, growth wasn't gradual, it was immediate. In 1910, the first businesses appeared almost overnight. They weren't built so much as they were positioned. Wooden buildings were dragged in on stone skids from the north and set down along a rough strip of ground beside the tracks. No foundation, no permanence, just placement. This wasn't a town being planned, it was a town assembling itself. By early 1911, this place had structure. Radville was officially incorporated on January 3rd, and the first council met inside Charlie Hill's hardware store. There were no speeches about the future, no grand vision of what this place might become. Actually, the first order of business was simple: to shut down Saudy's pool room by 10:30 p.m. You see, they weren't thinking decades ahead. They were dealing with what was right in front of them at the time. Things like fire protection, health concerns, and the landscape that didn't give much back. It was a place trying to make something grow where it didn't want to. The wind stripped it, the soil fought it. So they came up with policies like plant a tree, keep it alive, and they'd pay you 50 cents a tree. Everything here was practical. Everything was immediate. Because what had been given a name was already turning into something much larger than a town. It was to become a machine. Then came the decision that would define the physical grit of the town. The original town site was on the north side of the tracks. The water there was good, clear, sweet, and plentiful. But the drainage was a nightmare. When it rained, the heavy gumbo soil turned into a thick black mess that could stop a team of horses in their tracks. So the town leaders looked to the south side where the ground was higher. The drainage was better. It actually looked like a place where a modern town should stand. The problem, the water on the south side was alkali. It was bitter, mineral heavy, and hard on the stomach. But they had to make a choice. They chose the dry ground over the good water and moved the buildings across the tracks. They relocated the stores and the banks to the south side, facing each other across a grass strip that would later become Main Street. They made a decision that would shape daily life for decades. It was a trade-off of survival over comfort, the quintessential pioneer bargain. There were speeches about Radville becoming the most important divisional point on the Brandon-Lethbridge line. And for a time, it wasn't just talk, it was happening. By 1912, a proper station was built. And that same year, a roundhouse was constructed, a 10-stall brick structure with machine shops running day and night. By 1915, this place had changed completely. What had once been open prairie was now a working railway center, loud, busy, and alive. 45 men worked the shops in 8-hour shifts, as the whistle became the clock for the entire district. It told the farmers when it was noon and the children when it was time to go home. This was the era of the railway men. This was a time when engineers were notorious, like frosty winters and dusty roads. They were known across the line. And at its peak, 18 crews and 24 engines operated from here. Town reflected this expansion. Stores filled out Main Street, goods came in, and money moved rapidly through this place. John Eby's 2-story store carried everything a growing town could need. Charlie Hill was now selling Fords for $900, and Pickett's and Sherman's Hardware had become an Oldsmobile agency. For a while, everything pointed in one direction. Radville wasn't just a place, it was a functioning organ on the rail. Even at the height of the boom, the Prairie reminded them of their fragility. In the fall of 1918, the Spanish flu had arrived, and it didn't care about the railway's schedule. It swept through the district with little warning. In some homes, entire family members were stricken at once, and sometimes help didn't always arrive in time. Local doctors drove for days without sleep, moving from one isolated homestead to the next, doing what they could. It was a quiet, grim period that stripped away the optimism of the early 1900s. It was the first real sign that the modern prairie dream carried a cost. Then the 1930s hit. You see, in the 1920s, farmers were buying modern tractors and stoves. In the 1930s, they were burning their furniture for heat. The numbers are quite staggering. In 1929, wheat was $1.40 a bushel. By 1932, it had collapsed to 18 cents. You could sell a prime 1,000-pound steer and only get $10 for it, hardly enough to cover the cost of raising it. The land itself seemed to be rebelling as the drought lasted for years. Then came the grasshoppers, and by 1937 there was no grain for the livestock. Farmers cut thistle, a bitter, prickly weed, just to give their cattle something to chew on. Town council was overwhelmed. People began to leave, loading what few possessions they had into their vehicles, and started heading north. The Radville machine was being left behind. It was estimated that the 1930s set the district back 15 years. Through it all, the railway was the only thing that kept this town on the map. It was the only way food and fuel got in. Without it, Radville would have become a ghost town by 1935. The Prairie? Well, it wasn't done yet. In February 1947, a blizzard hit that redefined the word obstruction. The wind packed the snow into drifts as hard as concrete. Every line in and out of Radville was blocked. The railway sent a double header, 2 engines and a snowplow to clear the line. It got stuck. They sent another double header to rescue it. That too got stuck. 4 massive steam engines, 2 snowplows, and 2 cabooses were completely buried by the snow. You couldn't even see the smokestacks. It took until April to dig them out. For 2 months, this rail town was cut off from the world. By the late 1950s, the world had changed again. But this time it wasn't nature, it was engineering. The steam engine, that majestic locomotive that whistled into the night, was being replaced by diesel. To the accountants in Winnipeg, the diesel was efficient. To Radville, the diesel was a death sentence. These newer machines didn't require a massive amount of maintenance. They didn't need a 10-stall roundhouse every few hundred miles. They didn't need the same amount of crews. In 1959, the passenger service was gutted. The mixed trains were cancelled. And then the roundhouse, the heart, the engine, the reason for Radville's existence, closed its doors. The 18 crews were reduced to 1, and the sound of big hammers and the shift whistle fell silent. What to do with the roundhouse? Well, the people of Radville had an idea. They turned it into something practical. They stripped it out and turned it into a storage bin for wheat. The building that was designed to maintain the machines of motion was repurposed to hold the product of their soil. Radville is still here. It still has its treed streets, its hospital, and its neat lines of houses. And the railway station still stands, quiet now, but unchanged, in its place at the foot of Main Street. It's a different kind of town now. It's no longer a machine. It's a community. The big 2800 series engines may be ghosts, but the town remains a testament to what happens when you build something on a foundation of endurance. The railway might have built this town, but it's the people here that have made it last. Hey, my name is Mike. Thanks for coming along for the ride. If you enjoyed this one, consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. And remember, there's always another stretch of rail, another town, another story waiting over the horizon. Until next time, keep your wheels on the rails, and I'll see you down the line.